The wagon came down the north road on a gray autumn morning when the leaves had already begun to rot into the ditches. It was the kind of morning that felt like the end of something, though the girl in the wagon did not yet know what. Her wrists were not bound, but the man driving the wagon had made it clear that running would be a mistake. She was 14 years old. She was tall for her age, taller than most grown men in the villages they passed, and the villagers stared at her the way people stare at a wounded animal in a market square. Her skin was the muted dark gray-green of river stones after rain. Her lower jaw carried two small ivory tusks, no larger than a child's thumbnail. Her ears were pointed. Her eyes were the color of old amber. Her name was Myrka Varek, and she had been sold that summer for the price of a good plow horse. The manor rose out of the mist at the end of the road like a thing that had grown from the hillside rather than been built upon it. Gray stone, black slate roof, a single tower on the eastern side, 3 chimneys smoking against the pale sky. There was a low wall around the grounds and an iron gate that stood open. The wagon rolled through and stopped in the front courtyard, and the driver climbed down and stretched his back and said nothing to her. A man in a black wool coat came out of the front door and walked toward them without hurrying. He was not tall. He was not young. His hair was the color of iron filings, and his beard was trimmed close to his jaw, and his eyes were the pale gray of winter water. This was Lord Aldric Fenn. Myrka would not know his full name for another 3 days. She would not know his face without the coat for another year. She would not know his voice speaking her own name for another 2. He looked at her the way a man looks at a horse he has been told is difficult. He walked once around the wagon, slowly, with his hands folded behind his back. He asked the driver 2 questions in a voice too low for her to hear. The driver answered. Lord Fenn nodded once. He turned back toward the manor. He said, over his shoulder, "Bring her to the kitchen. Marta will show her where she sleeps." That was all. Marta was the head cook, a broad woman with red hands and a mouth like a slammed door. She looked Myrka up and down in the kitchen doorway and made a sound that was not quite a word. "Half-Orc," she said, "not a question. We had one before. She stole. Do you steal?" Myrka shook her head. Marta grunted. "You will sleep in the back pantry until the winter, then in the loft above the scullery with the 2 other girls. You will wake at 4th bell. You will not eat before the family has been served. You will not speak to Lord Fenn or Lady Fenn unless spoken to first. You will not enter the west wing. You will not touch the books in the library. You will not go into the chapel. Do you understand?" Myrka nodded. She was given a gray wool dress that was too short in the sleeves, a linen apron that was too long, and a pair of leather shoes that had belonged to a girl now dead. She was given a straw pallet in the back pantry that smelled of onions and mice. She was given a wooden bowl, a wooden spoon, and a rag to wash with. That night, she lay in the dark and listened to the manor breathing around her. The creak of old beams, the soft footsteps of the night watchman on the gravel outside, the distant crying of a child somewhere upstairs that turned out to be the wind in a broken window. She did not cry. She had done all her crying in the wagon on the 2nd day, when she had understood that no one was coming for her and no one ever would. She had made herself a promise that night. She would survive this place, whatever it cost, whatever it took. She did not yet know that the cost would be her voice, and that she would pay it willingly, and that she would not speak again for 20 years. The steward of the manor was a man named Halbrecht Voss. He had served Lord Fenn's father before him, and he had served Lord Fenn since Lord Fenn was a boy of 9, and he considered himself, in the quiet accounting he kept in his own head, to be the true master of the household. He was not a large man. He was not a strong man. He was the sort of man who had learned early that cruelty could be a currency and had spent his life accumulating it. He had a soft voice. He had soft hands. He wore a heavy silver chain of office around his neck that had belonged to his grandfather. He hated half-orcs the way some men hate the memory of being humiliated as children, which is to say, the way some men hate without needing a reason. Myrka understood this about him within a week of her arrival, because Halbrecht Voss made no attempt to hide it. He would pass her in a corridor and say nothing, but his eyes would move over her the way a butcher's eyes move over a carcass. He would find fault with her work when there was no fault. He would move the bucket she had just filled and then punish her for not filling it. He would tell Marta to give her the worst cuts of meat, the burnt ends of bread, the water at the bottom of the well. And Myrka, who had promised herself she would survive, endured all of it. She scrubbed floors. She emptied chamber pots. She carried firewood. She learned to make herself small in doorways and quiet at the table and invisible in corners. She spoke when spoken to, and only then, and only briefly. She had been at the manor for 2 years and 3 months when the incident happened. Lady Fenn, Lord Aldric's wife, a thin, quiet woman named Eleonora who suffered from headaches and had lost 3 children before any of them lived past a month. Lady Fenn owned a silver locket. It had belonged to her mother. It was the shape of a small oval engraved with roses, and it contained a lock of pale hair from her only living son, Cedric, who was then 12 years old and away at school in the capital. Lady Fenn wore this locket every day of her life. She wore it to bed. She wore it in the bath. She wore it in the garden. And one morning in early spring, when Myrka was 16 years old, Lady Fenn came down from her bedchamber weeping because the locket was gone. Halbrecht Voss did not even bother to search the house. He came to the kitchen with 2 footmen behind him. He said, in his soft voice, that Lady Fenn's locket was missing. He said the only person who had been in Lady Fenn's chamber that morning to bring the fire was the Half-Orc girl. He said that Half-Orcs were known thieves. He said that if the locket was returned within the hour, the girl would receive only a whipping. If it was not returned, she would be given to the magistrate and hanged, because the theft of a valuable item from a noble household was a capital crime in this county and had been for 100 years. Myrka had not taken the locket. She had not touched the locket. She had, that morning, seen the locket lying on the washstand beside the basin, exactly where Lady Fenn had left it when she washed her face. She had noticed it and thought it beautiful and gone about her work without touching it. She said this. She said it plainly and calmly and without weeping, because she had learned by then that weeping did no good. And Halbrecht Voss smiled his soft smile and said, "The Half-Orc lies." They searched her pallet in the pantry. They found the locket inside her wooden bowl, wrapped in a scrap of cloth from her own apron. Halbrecht Voss held it up between 2 fingers and said, in a voice loud enough for the whole kitchen to hear, "As I said." Lady Fenn was called down. Lady Fenn wept. Lord Fenn was in the study and could not be disturbed. Halbrecht Voss said the magistrate would be sent for in the morning. Myrka was locked in the coal cellar to wait. And in that cellar, in the dark, with her hands black with coal dust and her face wet with tears she had not meant to shed, Myrka understood something that changed the shape of the rest of her life. She understood that Halbrecht Voss had put the locket in her bowl himself. She understood that her word was worth nothing against his. She understood that if she survived this, and she did not think she would never again waste her voice on people who had already decided not to hear it. She would not scream in her defense. She would not beg. She would not explain. Her voice was the one thing that was hers, the one thing they could not take unless she gave it, and she would not give it. Not to Voss, not to the magistrate, not to anyone. She was still in the coal cellar at midnight when the door opened, and Lord Aldric Fenn came down the stone steps with a lantern in his hand. He looked at her for a long time. He did not speak. Then he said, quietly, "I know you did not take it. Marta saw Voss go into your pantry this morning. She came to me an hour ago." He set the lantern on the floor. He said, "You may go back to your pallet. Voss will be dismissed in the morning." He turned to leave. On the stairs, he stopped, and without turning around, he said, "I am sorry, girl. I should have known sooner." Myrka did not answer. She never spoke to him again after that night. She never spoke to anyone again after that night. Not a word. Not for 20 years. The household did not know what to make of her silence at first. Marta assumed it was shock and would pass in a week. When a month had gone by, she assumed it was stubbornness and would pass in a season. When a season had gone by, she stopped assuming anything and simply gave her orders through gestures and short commands, to which Myrka responded with nods, small movements of the hand, and, when the answer was more complex, careful marks on a slate she began to carry in her apron pocket. Marta was illiterate and could not read the marks, but she came to understand which gestures meant which answers, and after 2 years, the two of them communicated as well as most married couples. The other servants were less patient. The two scullery girls, Bess and Annette, mocked her openly for the first year, calling her the mute beast, pulling her braid, hiding her shoes. Myrka bore it without response, and eventually they grew bored. Boredom, she had learned, was the death of most cruelty. Only the cruelty of men like Halbrecht Voss required no audience to sustain it. When Bess broke her arm, falling from a hayloft in Myrka's 3rd year, Myrka was the one who set the bone, having watched a healer do it once in the village where she was born. Bess did not thank her, but Bess also stopped hiding her shoes. Annette followed Bess's lead in all things. That was the end of that particular torment. The footmen ignored her. The gardeners nodded to her in the mornings. The stable boy, a shy, red-haired child named Thomas, who was frightened of nearly everything, discovered that she would let him sit beside her when she peeled potatoes in the afternoon sun, and he began to bring her small gifts: a bird's feather, a smooth stone, a piece of amber he had found in the stream, which she accepted gravely and kept in a small tin box under her pallet. Thomas talked enough for both of them. He told her about his mother, who was dead, and his father, who drank, and his sister, who had run away to the port city and never written. Myrka listened. Listening, she had discovered, was a language of its own, and one she was better at than most people who spoke. Lady Fenn treated her with careful, distant kindness. Lady Fenn had, after the incident with the locket, understood something about her own household that she had not wanted to understand, and she carried the shame of it for the rest of her life. She gave Myrka the second best cuts of meat from the family table. She gave her a wool cloak in the winter of the 3rd year, dark charcoal, warm, the finest cloak Myrka had ever owned. She gave her, without a word of explanation, a small bone pendant on a leather cord, which had belonged to Lady Fenn's own grandmother, and which Myrka wore against her collarbone from that day forward. Lady Fenn did not try to make Myrka speak. Lady Fenn, of all the household, was the one who most clearly understood that Myrka had not chosen silence out of stubbornness or shock, but out of judgment, and that the judgment had been earned. Lord Aldric Fenn watched her. He watched her for the 1st year without speaking to her. He watched her for the 2nd year with occasional short instructions. Bring the fire, close the shutter, fetch my cloak, to which she responded promptly and without acknowledgement beyond a nod. He watched her for the 3rd year, and by the end of the 3rd year, when she was 19 and had grown into her adult height and the full breadth of her shoulders, when she moved through the manor like a shadow that had learned every stone of the walls, he began to leave things where she would find them. First, it was a book on the small table in the library, open to a page of pictures of birds. She looked at it while dusting. She could not read the words, but the pictures held her a long time. 2 days later, the book had been moved to a shelf where she could reach it, and beside it lay a slate and a piece of chalk. She understood then, without being told, that this was permission, and possibly instruction. She began to teach herself to read. She copied the shapes of the letters onto the slate. She matched the shapes to the pictures. She was not fast. She was not clever. But she was patient in a way that most human children are not, because human children do not yet understand that patience is the only real weapon of the weak. 6 months later, on a night when Lord Fenn had drunk more wine than usual after dinner and Lady Fenn had gone to bed with a headache, Lord Fenn came into the library where Myrka was polishing the brass lamps, and he sat down in his chair, and he said, without looking at her, "You know the letters now. I have watched you." She said nothing. He said, "If you would learn to read properly, I will teach you. If you would not, put the slate back on the shelf tomorrow, and I will trouble you no more." The slate was not on the shelf the next morning. It was in her apron pocket, where she had put it before going to bed, so that if she woke in the night with a question, she could touch it and remember that the world was larger than the pantry where she slept. Lord Aldric Fenn saw the slate in her pocket at breakfast and said nothing. But that evening after the household was asleep, he sent Thomas, the stable boy, down to the pantry with a message, the library, after the midnight bell. Bring the slate. The lessons began that winter and continued for 11 years. They took place always at night, always in the library, always after the household was asleep. Lord Aldric Fenn was a patient teacher. He was not a warm man, and he did not become warmer for the teaching. He did not smile at her when she got a word right. He did not scold her when she got a word wrong. He simply corrected and moved on and expected her to remember. He taught her the alphabet first, then simple words, then the reading of small psalms from the household prayer book, then the reading of letters and ledgers, and finally, in the 5th year of their lessons, the reading of law. He taught her the law because she asked. She asked in the only way she had, by writing the question on her slate one night and setting it before him on the desk. The question was, W8LA S8 U cooled hang me FORTHELOC ket. Lord Fenn read the question. He was silent for a long time. Then he stood up and walked to a shelf and took down a heavy leather-bound volume and set it on the desk in front of her and opened it to a page near the middle. He said, "This one, and also this one." He pointed to another paragraph. "And also, in the case of a servant of unfree birth or foreign extraction, this one. Read them. Then we will talk about what they mean." He sat down across from her. He waited. He did not fill her silence with his own words. That was one of the things she came to trust about him. She read the laws that winter, and the laws of the 4 surrounding counties in the spring, and the laws of the kingdom in the summer. And by the time she was 24, she knew more about the inheritance codes of the northern nobility than most magistrates. Lord Fenn tested her. He would set out a problem: a widow with 2 sons and a nephew, a disputed will, a marriage of unequal rank. And she would work through the answer on her slate and hand it to him, and he would nod or make a small correction or say, quietly, "Better than my own solicitor would have done." He said this once when she was 27, and it was the closest he ever came to praising her. She kept the memory of it the way other women keep a wedding ring. She did not speak, not once, not in any lesson, not in any question, not in any answer. Everything passed between them in writing, or in gestures, or in the long, comfortable silences that had become their real language. Lord Fenn did not press. He had understood from the first night that the silence was not something she was refusing to break, but something she was choosing to keep, and that a choice of that kind, held that long, was not a wound but a shield. He respected it. He built the lessons around it. He wrote his own answers on the slate when he wanted her to have them in her own hand, and spoke aloud only when the answers were for the room and not for her. The household did not know about the lessons for the first 3 years. Lady Fenn found out in the 4th. She came down for a book one night and saw the light under the library door and pushed it open and saw them there. The old lord and the tall, silent half-orc woman bent over a book together, the chalk moving on the slate. Lady Fenn stood in the doorway for a long moment. Neither of them saw her. She closed the door quietly and went back upstairs, and she never spoke of what she had seen to her husband, and she never spoke of it to Myrka, and she never spoke of it to anyone at all. But the next morning, she took a small key from her sewing basket and put it on the table beside Myrka's bowl at breakfast. It was the key to the library. Myrka had always had to wait for Lord Fenn to unlock the door. From that morning on, she did not. The lessons deepened. In the 6th year, Lord Fenn began to have her copy documents. His hand was growing stiff. His eyes were beginning to fail him in the evenings. She had a good hand. Clean, small, even. And she was faster than any of the clerks he had once employed. He began to dictate letters to her, which she wrote out and he signed. He began to have her draft contracts, which he reviewed and corrected. He began, in the 7th year, to have her keep the household ledgers, a task that had been Halbrecht Voss's before his dismissal and had passed through the hands of 3 subsequent stewards, all of whom had done it badly. Myrka did it well. She did it very well. She was 30 years old when Lord Fenn first said to her, one autumn night by the fire with the wind rattling the shutters, "You know this estate now better than any man alive except me. And when I am dead, better than any man alive." He said this, looking into the fire, not at her. She said nothing. He said, "I do not know what to do about it, but I know that it is true." Then he stood up and said good night and went to bed, and she banked the fire and locked the library and went down to the pantry. She still slept in the pantry, though a better bed had been offered her many times and refused. And she lay in the dark and thought about what he had said, and she did not sleep until the 4th bell. Lady Eleanora Fenn died in the 12th year of Myrka's service, in the middle of a wet spring that had brought fevers to half the households in the county. She was not yet 50. The fever took her in 9 days. Myrka nursed her through the last 5 of them, because Lady Fenn had asked, in the small clear voice she still had on the 4th day, that Myrka be the one to sit with her. Lord Fenn was there also. The 2 of them sat on either side of the bed through the nights, and the physician came and went and shook his head, and the household waited below stairs with the hush that falls on a house where a death is coming and no one wants to be the one to name it. Lady Fenn spoke to Myrka on the last night. She said, in a voice thin as paper, "You have never spoken to me in all these years. Do you know that I have wondered what your voice sounds like every day since the summer you were 16? Myrka did not answer. She held Lady Fenn's hand. She did not weep, but her throat closed, and Lady Fenn saw it, and Lady Fenn smiled. "I do not need to hear it now. I only wanted you to know I had wondered." A little later she said, "Look after him. He does not know how to be alone. He has never known." A little after that she died. Lord Fenn did not weep. He sat in the chair beside the bed for a long time with his wife's hand in his, and his face did not change, and his shoulders did not shake. And when the physician came in at dawn to confirm what everyone already knew, Lord Fenn stood up and thanked him and walked out of the bedchamber and down the stairs and out into the garden. He walked once around the garden. He came back inside. He gave the necessary orders: the priest, the coffin, the letters to family, the black cloths for the windows. And he retired to his study, and he did not come out for 2 days. Myrka was the one who brought him food he did not eat. She was the one who brought him water. She was the one who, on the 2nd night, sat down across from him in the study without being asked and picked up the pen and drew the ledger toward her and began, in her small, even hand, to write the household accounts for the week because someone had to and no one else could. He watched her for a long time. Then he took out a decanter of the good brandy he kept in a locked cabinet, and he poured a glass for himself, and, after a moment's hesitation, a 2nd glass, which he set at her elbow. She had never drunk brandy before. She drank it. He watched her drink it. Then he said, in a voice so low she almost did not hear him, "She loved you, you know. She never quite knew how to say it, but she loved you." Myrka wrote on her slate, "I know." She turned it so he could see. He read it. He nodded. He said nothing more that night, but he did not send her away, and she stayed in the study with him until the 3rd bell, working through the ledgers while he sat and stared at the fire. And when she stood up to go, he raised one hand in a small gesture of thanks that she carried with her down the stairs and into her pantry and into her dreams. The household grew colder after Lady Fenn's death. Lord Fenn was not a cruel master, but he had never been a warm one, and his wife had been the warmth of the house, the one who remembered the servants' birthdays and the illnesses of their mothers and the names of their children. Without her, the manor became a place where people did their work and went to bed and did their work again without the small human warmth that had held it together. Marta grew shorter with the girls. The footmen drank more. Thomas, who was no longer a boy but a young man of 19, began to talk about leaving for the port city where his sister had disappeared. Myrka moved through it all in her silence, doing her work, keeping the ledgers, meeting Lord Fenn in the library at midnight, and no one saw that she grieved the lady as deeply as anyone in the house except the Lord himself. The bone pendant that Lady Fenn had given her, she wore against her collarbone every day. She would touch it sometimes with 2 fingers, without thinking, when she was alone. She touched it more often after Lady Fenn's death. It was not a habit she would have been able to explain if anyone had asked. No one asked. 6 months after the funeral, on a bright, cold morning in autumn, a letter arrived from the capital. It was in a fine hand on heavy paper, and it bore a seal Myrka did not recognize. She brought it to Lord Fenn in the study on a small silver tray. He looked at the seal for a long moment before he broke it. He read the letter. His face did not change, but a small muscle moved in his jaw. He set the letter down. He said, without looking at her, "My son is coming home." Cedric Fenn had been sent away to school at the age of 8 and had, in the 22 years since, returned to the manor exactly 4 times. Once at 10 for a summer, once at 14 for his mother's uncle's funeral, once at 19 when he passed through on his way to a friend's estate in the south, and once at 24 for his mother's own funeral, at which he had wept publicly and expensively and left within 3 days for the capital. He was now 30. He was a tall, well-made man with his mother's fair hair and his father's gray eyes and, so far as anyone in the household could determine, none of either parent's better qualities. He wrote to his father twice a year, requesting money. He received the money. He wrote no other letters. He arrived at the manor on a cold afternoon in late autumn with 2 servants of his own, a black horse, 6 trunks, and a woman he introduced as his fiancée, a pale, thin-lipped young noblewoman named Lady Vessa Corin, whose family had once been rich and now was not. The wedding, he explained to his father over the first supper, would take place at the manor in the spring. The bride's family required a substantial dowry from the groom's side, which was unusual but explicable given the disparity in current fortunes. He, Cedric, would of course be honored to arrange the disbursement of funds from the estate, thereby sparing his father the trouble at his age. His father, sitting at the head of the table with his hands folded very still on either side of his plate, said, "We will discuss it." Cedric had grown up in a house with a half-orc servant and had, as a boy, occasionally been cruel to her in the small casual way of noble children, pulling her braid, spitting in her water, ordering her to do things she was not required to do. But he had been small and she had been already tall, and she had endured him the way she endured all small weather. He had not seen her since the funeral, 6 years earlier. He looked at her that first evening with an expression she could not immediately read. It resolved, over the following days, into a mixture of contempt and calculation. He noticed that she had access to the library. He noticed that she carried the household keys. He noticed that his father spoke to her, briefly, quietly, and with no evident affection, but spoke to her. In a way he did not speak to any of the other servants. He noticed that she did not speak back. He noticed that she never spoke at all. He asked his father about it on the 3rd night, at supper, when Lady Vessa had gone up to bed with a headache, and the 2 men were alone at the long table. "The half-orc. She is dumb?" Lord Fenn, cutting his meat with slow precision, said, "She chooses not to speak." Cedric laughed, a short, surprised laugh. "For how long?" 14 years. "And you tolerate it?" "I have never found her silence a burden." Cedric considered this, sipping his wine. The other servants say she keeps your ledgers, that she has the run of your library. The other servants are correct. Father. Cedric set down his glass. This is not appropriate. A half-orc servant with access to your accounts. What if she is stealing from you? Lord Fenn looked at his son for a long moment. He said, She is not stealing from me. Then he returned to his meat, and the subject was closed. But it was not closed, of course. It was only closed at the table. Cedric began, from that night forward, a quiet campaign against Myrka. He complained about her presence in the halls. He suggested she be moved to work only in the kitchens. He questioned the household accounts, going over Myrka's ledgers page by page with a small silver pen, looking for errors he did not find. He spoke sharply to her when his father was not present. He tripped her once in a corridor, deliberately, when she was carrying a tray of glasses, and stood watching as she picked up the broken pieces and said, "Clumsy beast." She did not look at him. She did not stop working. She swept up the glass and carried it away and returned with a broom to be sure no shards remained, and Cedric stood watching her the whole time with an expression of thoughtful dislike. Lady Vessa was afraid of her. Lady Vessa had never seen an orc of any description before, and she had been raised on the sort of stories that noble women in the capital told their children about the northern kingdoms, in which orcs ate babies and drank from skulls and served demons in the deep places of the earth. She would not be alone in a room with Myrka. She would not allow Myrka to serve her food. She would not allow Myrka to touch her clothes. Myrka accommodated this without any sign of insult. It was, in truth, a relief. She had one less person to attend upon, and Lady Vessa's demands were the sort of small, unrelenting nuisances that had made maids in wealthier houses go quietly mad. Lord Fenn, in the library at midnight, wrote on the slate one night, "He will to remove you after I am deed." Myrka read it. She wrote, "I know." He wrote, "I will not let him." She looked at him. She wrote, after a long pause, "He will not ask your permission." Lord Fenn read this. He was silent for a long time. Then he took the slate and wiped it clean with his sleeve, and he said aloud, in a voice she had not heard him use before, harder and colder than any voice she had ever heard him use with her, "We shall see about that, girl. We shall see." The work began that winter. Lord Aldric Fenn was a careful man, and he had begun to understand, in the weeks after his son's return, that carefulness alone would not be enough. He needed something more than caution. He needed a plan that would survive his own death, and that could not be broken by his son's cleverness, or by his son's lawyers, or by the ordinary corruptions of country magistrates who could be bought with a good horse and a bottle of wine. He needed, in short, a will that could not be contested, and a witness who could not be silenced. He had, in his lifetime, made 3 previous wills. The first, drafted when Cedric was a small boy, had left everything to Cedric with a generous provision for Lady Fenn. The second, drafted after Lady Fenn's death, had left everything to Cedric with modest bequests to the household staff and the parish church. The third, drafted a year later, had reduced Cedric's inheritance in favor of certain charitable trusts and had been kept in the strongbox of a solicitor in the county town. Lord Fenn now determined to make a fourth. He did not tell his solicitor. He did not tell his son. He told, in the whole world, one person, Myrka Varek. He began by asking her to draft it. He gave her the principles, what he wished to preserve, what he wished to disperse, what he wished undone, and he asked her to write him a draft in her own hand, using the legal formulas she had learned from his own books that would accomplish these things in a manner that could withstand challenge. She worked on it for 3 months. She sat with him in the library nearly every night that winter, revising, questioning, refining. The document that emerged at the end of it was 14 pages long. It was, by any professional standard, a masterpiece. Lord Fenn, reading it aloud to himself under his breath, said only, when he had finished, "Yes, this will do." The provisions were as follows. To his son Cedric Fenn, the townhouse in the capital, together with an annuity sufficient to maintain a gentleman's life, but not sufficient to indulge one, payable quarterly through the offices of a bank in the port city and revocable in the event of certain enumerated bad conducts. To the parish church, a small endowment for the maintenance of the roof and the graveyard in memory of Lady Eleonora. To Marta, the cook, to Thomas, the stable boy, now a stableman, to each of the 2 scullery girls, and to each of the 6 other servants of the household by name. A lump sum equivalent to 5 years' wages, together with a small pension for life. To Sarah Duskwood, a name that appeared in the will and did not appear anywhere else in the household ledgers. A specific bequest of 200 crowns and a certain small carved wooden horse from Lord Fenn's own boyhood to be delivered to her by hand. And to Myrka Varek, the manor. All of it. The house, the grounds, the tenant farms, the timber rights, the mill, the fishery on the river, the whole of the estate that had been in the Fenn family for 400 years, entailed to her and her heirs in perpetuity, with the single condition that she use it as she saw fit and answered to no one in the matter. She had read this provision the first time on a night in February when the wind was howling in the chimneys, and she had set the draft down and looked at Lord Fenn across the desk, and she had shaken her head once, slowly. He said, "Yes." She wrote on the slate, "Dihe will kel me." He said, "They will try. That is why we must be careful." She wrote, "Dihe will say you we're mad." He said, "That is why we must have witnesses, real ones, not paid ones, not from this county. And that is why the document must not be lodged with any solicitor Cedric can find or bribe. It must be hidden where he cannot reach it and produced only when it is safe to produce it. Do you understand?" She read this. She wrote, "WHOS Sarah DUSKWOOD." Lord Fenn looked at her for a long moment. He said, "An old friend. From before I was married. She lives now in the village of Duskroot in the eastern hills. She was my tutor when I was a boy. She is the one person outside this room who knows what I am doing and why. She has a copy of this document, sealed, in her keeping, along with a letter in my hand explaining its provenance. If anything happens to the original, hers will stand." Sarah Duskwood was, Myrka came to learn, an older orc woman past 50, muted dark gray-green skin, silver-streaked dark hair worn loose, deep gray eyes, a long, dark, worn robe. She had been Lord Fenn's tutor from the age of 9 to the age of 15. She had been dismissed by Lord Fenn's father when it was discovered that she had been teaching the boy, alongside his lessons in Latin and mathematics, the older customs and languages of the Orcish peoples of the Northern Hills. A body of learning the elder Lord Fenn considered inappropriate for a young nobleman. She had gone to Duskroot, where she had lived quietly ever since, teaching the village children to read. Lord Aldric had corresponded with her for 40 years. He had visited her twice a year, always without company, always without explanation to his household. Myrka had noticed the visits and had not understood them. Now she did. The document was executed on a Tuesday in April, in the library, in the presence of 3 witnesses whom Lord Fenn had brought up from the port city and lodged at an inn under other names: a merchant, a retired ship's captain, and a solicitor from a firm that had no connection to any Fenn business anywhere. They read the will. They watched Lord Fenn sign it. They watched Myrka sign it in her clean, small hand as executor. They signed it themselves. They took a copy each, sealed in wax, sworn to secrecy, and departed the same afternoon by a road that did not pass any village where they were known. The original, together with a personal letter in Lord Fenn's own hand explaining his reasons, was placed in a leather case and hidden in a place known only to Lord Fenn and Myrka. It was a place that would not have occurred to Cedric to look, because it was a place Cedric considered beneath his notice. Lord Aldric Fenn was 67 years old when the will was signed. He had been a healthy man his whole life. He rode every morning. He walked in the garden every afternoon. He drank moderately and slept well. He had no reason to believe he would not live another 15 years, and possibly 20. But the following winter, in the 18th year of Myrka's service, he caught a chill on a wet ride home from the neighboring estate, and the chill turned into a fever, and the fever settled into his lungs, and by the time the spring came, he was a man of 68 who moved like a man of 80. The strength did not return with the warm weather. He grew thinner. His voice grew softer. His eyes, which had always been the pale gray of winter water, grew paler, and sometimes when he sat by the fire in the evenings, he would forget for a long moment where he was and stare into the flames with the still expression of a man watching something no one else could see. Cedric had been living at the manor for the better part of a year by then. The wedding to Lady Vessa had taken place in the spring, a small affair given the family's mourning, and the newlyweds had settled into the West Wing with an air of permanence that Lord Fenn had noted without comment. Cedric had assumed control of certain aspects of the estate, the timber contracts, the tenant leases, over his father's mild objections, on the grounds that his father's health required rest. Cedric's own solicitor, a smooth man named Master Velich, had begun to visit the manor regularly, and had begun to spend long hours in the study with the older man's account books and papers. Lord Fenn permitted this. Lord Fenn permitted, in the last 2 years of his life, a great many things he would not have permitted before, because he understood that resistance now would only accelerate what was coming, and because he had already put in place the thing that mattered. Myrka nursed him. She did it without being asked. In the summer of the 19th year, when it became clear that Lord Fenn could no longer manage the stairs to his own bedchamber without help, she moved without ceremony from her pantry to a small room next to his, so that she would hear him if he called in the night. She helped him dress in the mornings. She helped him eat. She brought him the books he wanted from the library and read to him, silently, by moving her finger down the page while he watched. A ritual they had developed for the evenings when his eyes were too tired to read. She kept the ledgers. She managed the correspondence. She dealt with the tenants who came to the door with problems, communicating with them through Marta and Thomas and, when necessary, by written note. She did all of this without ever speaking, and the household, which had grown used to her silence, did not notice any change. Cedric noticed. Cedric had noticed for a long time. His campaign against her had grown quieter as his father grew sicker, and this was more frightening than the earlier hostility, because Myrka understood, and Lord Fenn understood, and had told her so, that Cedric was simply waiting. He was waiting for his father to die. He would move against her the day after the funeral, and he would move with the full weight of his position as the new lord, and he would move with the assistance of Master Velich and any magistrate he chose to purchase. Myrka would need to be ready. Lord Fenn had made her ready, but the readiness sat in her chest like a cold stone all through that autumn and winter, and she did not sleep well, and she grew thin. Lady Vessa, in her 7th month of a pregnancy that had been announced in the spring with great satisfaction from Cedric, had grown even more afraid of Myrka. She had convinced herself that the sight of an orc, even a half-orc, even at a distance, would mark the child. She refused to leave the West Wing when Myrka was in the main house. She ate all her meals in her own chamber. She demanded that Myrka be removed from the household entirely, and Cedric had promised her, in Myrka's hearing, that this would be done as soon as circumstances allow. Circumstances, of course, meant Lord Fenn's death. Myrka heard this in a corridor one afternoon and did not break stride. She was carrying a tray of soup up to Lord Fenn. She delivered the soup. She helped him drink it. He said, when he had finished, "What is it, girl?" She wrote on the slate, "H.E. promised her Iwald be gone." He said, "Yes, I would have thought less of him if he had not." He smiled, very faintly. But he will find, girl, that some promises are harder to keep than others. The winter of that year was the hardest anyone in the county could remember. Snow lay on the ground from November until March. The tenants suffered. 2 families lost children. Lord Fenn, in his bed by the window, watched the snow with an expression that grew each week more distant, more transparent, more like the face of a man already halfway to somewhere else. Myrka read to him with her finger on the page. She kept the fire high. She fed him broth when he could no longer eat solid food. And on a morning in late February, when the sun rose blood red over a landscape white as bone, Lord Aldric Fenn woke her at the 4th bell by tapping on the wall between their rooms, a signal they had agreed on months before. And when she came in, he said, in the small, clear voice he still had on some mornings, "Sit down, girl. It is time we talked." He did not die that morning. He did not die that week. But he had, he told her, understood in the night that he would die soon, and that certain things needed to be said between them while he was still able to say them. He asked her to sit in the chair by the bed. She sat. He looked at her for a long time. She had been in his household for 19 years and 6 months. He had taught her for 11 years. He had known her in the way that matters, better than he had known his own son. He said, "I have not thanked you." She did not answer. He said, "I mean to thank you now, before I lose the words. You have kept this house. You have kept its accounts. You have kept its people. You have kept me. I know what it has cost you." He paused. He said, "I know what your silence has cost you. I want you to know that I have known every day that it was a gift you were giving me by choosing to give it in this house at all. You could have gone anywhere with it. You stayed here." She had not wept in 19 years. She wept then. Not loudly. Not for long. She sat in the chair by the bed and the tears came down her face, and she did not wipe them, because to wipe them would have been to acknowledge them, and she was not yet ready to do that. Lord Fenn watched her weep. He did not reach for her hand. He knew, by then, what she would accept and what she would not, and he knew that a touch at that moment would have been a violation of the space between them. He waited. When she was finished, he said, "There is one more thing I need you to do. I need you to promise me that you will speak when the will is read. Not before, if you cannot bear to. But when the will is read, you will need to read it aloud yourself. My voice will not be there. Sarah will not travel that far in winter. There will be no one else in the room who can be trusted to read the true words. You will have to do it." She looked at him. She wrote on the slate, slowly, "I do not know if I can." He said, "I know. I know you do not know. I am asking you to try." She wrote, "W8 I cannot." He said, "Then read it silently and hand it to the magistrate. The document will speak for itself. But if you can find the voice, girl, if you can, then use it. Because there is a difference in this world between a document that is passed across a table and a document that is read aloud by the person to whom it gives everything. The one is a piece of paper. The other is a fact." He was silent for a moment. He said, "And there is one more reason. Cedric will need to hear it in your voice. He will need to hear it and know that the silent creature he has despised in this house for a year has been, all along, the person who understood everything he thought he was hiding." "Do you understand?" She understood. She wrote on the slate, "I will try." He said, "That is enough. That is more than enough. Thank you, girl." He closed his eyes for a moment. Then he opened them and said, "The document is where we placed it. The letter to the magistrate is with it. The 3 witnesses have been notified by post that when they receive a certain code word from you, they are to come at once. The code word is on the last page of the letter. Sarah has been notified by the same means. When the funeral is over, not before, you will retrieve the document. You will send the letters. You will wait until the family is gathered. You will read. He paused. I am sorry to leave this to you. I would have done it differently if I could have, but I could not. She wrote, You have done Inaje. He read it. He nodded. He said, Good girl. Those were, though neither of them knew it that night, the last words he ever spoke to her that she would remember with any clarity. He lingered for another 12 days. He slept most of the time. He took a little broth and a little wine. He spoke, when he spoke at all, in fragments. Half sentences about his boyhood, about his wife, about a horse he had loved when he was 15. He did not speak to Cedric. Cedric came to the door of the bedchamber twice and stood looking in and left again without speaking. Lady Vessa did not come at all. She had been delivered of a healthy son 3 weeks earlier and was, she said, too weak to leave her chamber. The child had been named Aldric, after his grandfather, in the sort of gesture Cedric considered obligatory. Lord Aldric Fenn died in the 12th hour of the 12th day, in the middle of the afternoon, with Myrka Varek sitting in the chair beside his bed, holding his right hand in both of hers. She had not held his hand before. She had not, in all their years, touched him except in the small, necessary ways of nursing. He had reached for her hand an hour before he died, and she had taken it, and she had not let go. His fingers were very thin. His grip was very light. At the end, there was a small sound in his throat that was not quite a word, and then his hand relaxed, and then he was gone. She sat there for a long time before she moved. When she moved, it was to lay his hand back on the coverlet and to close his eyes with 2 fingers, as she had done for Lady Fenn 9 years before. Then she went to the door and opened it and gestured to the footman waiting in the corridor. She did not speak. She did not need to. Her face said what needed to be said. The household knew, within an hour, that the old lord was dead. The bell in the tower was rung 11 times, once for each decade of his life, plus 1 for the year he had begun. The black cloths were brought down from the attic and hung in the windows. Cedric, in the study, put down his glass of wine and stood up and said quietly to Master Velich, It is done. We may begin. The funeral was held 4 days later at the parish church in a cold rain that turned the road to the graveyard into a stream of mud. Half the county came. Lord Fenn had been respected, if not much loved, and respect draws mourners in the north the way affection does elsewhere. Cedric wore black and wept publicly at the graveside, a performance that fooled no one who had been in the household for the past year and fooled everyone who had not. Lady Vessa, still weak from childbirth, watched from the church door with the infant in her arms. Myrka stood at the back of the church, in her charcoal cloak, with the bone pendant against her collarbone and her braided plait over her left shoulder, and she did not weep at the graveside because she had done all her weeping in the bedchamber 12 days before. The reading of the will was set for the following Tuesday in the great hall of the manor at 10 in the morning. The family solicitor, a country man named Master Coburn, who had drafted the earlier 3 wills and been comfortable with the 3rd of them, would preside. Master Velich would be present as Cedric's personal counsel. The parish priest would be present as an independent witness. The senior servants of the household would be present in accordance with tradition, since certain bequests were customarily made to them, and it was considered courteous to have them hear the terms directly. Myrka would be present in her role as head of the household staff, which had become her de facto position over the past 2 years without ever having been formalized by title. Cedric had prepared. Master Velich had, on the day after Lord Fenn's death, produced a document he described as the most recent will, which he said had been drafted at Cedric's father's request, the previous autumn during a visit Master Velich had made to the manor to consult on other matters. This document, Cedric explained to Master Coburn, who received it with a wary politeness, superseded the 3rd will known to Master Coburn's firm and left the entirety of the estate to Cedric with the exception of the modest bequests to the church and the servants. Master Coburn had looked at the document. He had looked at the signature, which was undoubtedly Lord Fenn's. He had looked at the seal, which was undoubtedly Lord Fenn's. He had said, "This is highly irregular, but it is not, on its face, invalid. It will be read on Tuesday along with any other documents that may come to light." Myrka, on the night of the funeral, had gone alone to the place where the true will was hidden. It was in the false back of a small carved chest that Lord Fenn kept in the corner of his bedchamber and had used, for as long as Myrka had known him, as a place to throw old letters and small keepsakes. Cedric had gone through this chest twice in the past week, looking for exactly the sort of document he now suspected must exist somewhere. He had found nothing. He would not have found anything, even if he had known where to look, because the false back was very fine work. Done by a joiner Lord Fenn had brought up from the port city 3 years earlier for that single purpose, and the joiner had been paid enough to remain silent and had not lived long enough to break his silence in any case, having died of a fever the following winter. Myrka opened the chest. She pressed the 2 small nails that were not nails at the correct pattern. The false back released. She took out the leather case. Inside were the 14 pages of the will, the personal letter from Lord Fenn to whoever should read it after his death, and the sealed instructions to the 3 witnesses and to Sarah Duskwood. She sent the letters the next morning by 3 separate writers, paid in advance from a small purse Lord Fenn had left for the purpose. The writers did not know each other and did not know the contents of their letters. They took different roads. The letter to Sarah Duskwood traveled the shortest distance and would arrive within a day. The letters to the 3 witnesses would take 3, 4, and 5 days respectively. Myrka calculated the timing carefully. The witnesses would arrive at the manor on the Monday evening before the reading, from 3 different directions, and would appear together the following morning at 10 o'clock, unannounced, walking into the great hall behind Sarah Duskwood, who would arrive that same morning with the sealed copy of the will in her hand. Cedric would not know they were coming. Master Velich would not know they were coming. The parish priest would not know they were coming. And Myrka herself would be standing at the back of the great hall with the original will in the pocket of her apron, waiting for the moment when Master Coburn opened the false will and prepared to read it aloud. That, she had decided, would be the moment she would step forward. That, she had decided, would be the moment she would speak. Tuesday morning was clear and cold, with a thin blue sky and a wind that smelled of the last of the winter snow melting off the hills. The great hall of the manor had not been used for a formal occasion since the wedding of Cedric and Lady Vessa the previous spring, and it had been aired and swept and warmed with 2 fires laid at either end. The long table had been set out at the head of the room, and Master Coburn sat behind it in a black gown, with a pile of documents in front of him, and Master Velich standing at his right hand, and Cedric in a black coat with a silver mourning band on the sleeve, seated in a chair to Master Coburn's left. The parish priest sat in a chair on the right. The servants, Marta, Thomas, the 2 footmen, the 2 scullery girls, the gardeners, and 3 tenant representatives, stood in a small clump at the middle of the room. Myrka stood at the very back, near the door, in her gray wool dress and her charcoal cloak, with the bone pendant at her collarbone and her hand in the pocket of her apron. Master Coburn cleared his throat. He said, "We are gathered to hear the last will and testament of Lord Aldric Fenn, of this manor, of this county, of the kingdom. I have before me a document delivered to me the day after his death by Master Velich, purporting to be the most recent will drafted by his lordship. I have not verified this document in the manner I would ordinarily prefer, given the constraints of time. I shall read it as it stands. If any person present has cause to challenge it, they may speak after the reading." He picked up the document. The door at the back of the hall opened. Sarah Duskwood came in first. She was as Lord Fenn had described her. An older orc woman past 50, silver-streaked dark hair worn loose, deep gray eyes, a long dark worn robe thin at the elbows. She carried a small leather satchel over her shoulder. Behind her came the 3 witnesses, the merchant, the retired ship's captain, and the solicitor from the port city firm, all three in traveling cloaks, all three unfamiliar to anyone in the room. They walked forward until they stood in the aisle between the servants and the head table, and they did not sit down. Cedric was on his feet. Who are these people? Master Coburn, who are these people? Master Coburn had also risen. He was looking at Sarah Duskwood with an expression of confusion that was slowly resolving into something else. He said, Madam, may I know who you are? Sarah Duskwood said, in a voice quiet and clear and completely unafraid, I am Sarah Duskwood of Duskroot. I was tutor to Lord Aldric Fenn from his 9th year to his 15th. I hold in my satchel a sealed copy of the last will and testament of Lord Aldric Fenn, executed in the presence of these 3 witnesses in the April of the year before last. I am here at his express instruction, given to me by letter 22 months ago, to appear in this hall on the day of the reading of his will, and to produce this document if the will being read is not the true will. Is the will being read the true will, Master Coburn? Master Coburn said, I do not know, madam, Cedric said. Of course it is the true will. My father drafted it last autumn. Master Velich witnessed it. This creature is an impostor, a lunatic, some old orc woman my father knew as a boy and pensioned off. Master Coburn, throw her out. Sarah Duskwood did not move. She said, The 3 gentlemen with me are the witnesses to the true will. They will confirm its provenance under oath. The original of the true will, in Lord Fenn's own hand, was not lodged with me. It was hidden at the manor, in a place known only to Lord Fenn and to one other person. That person is here in this room. She turned. She looked at the back of the hall. Every head in the room turned with hers. Myrka Varek stood at the back of the great hall in her gray wool dress and her charcoal cloak, and she took her hand out of her apron pocket, and in her hand were 14 pages of paper folded twice, tied with a black ribbon, sealed with the personal seal of Lord Aldric Fenn. She walked forward slowly. She walked past the tenant representatives. She walked past the gardeners. She walked past the scullery girls, who stared at her. She walked past the 2 footmen. She walked past Thomas, who was weeping without knowing he was weeping. She walked past Marta, who was holding her own hands very tightly together in front of her apron. She walked up the aisle between the servants and the head table. She walked past Sarah Duskwood, who touched her arm as she passed. She walked past the 3 witnesses, who bowed their heads slightly as she passed. She reached the head table. She untied the black ribbon. She broke the seal. Cedric said, Father, that is not. That woman cannot read. Myrka Varek opened her mouth. For the first time in 20 years, she spoke. Her voice was low and rough from disuse, and it cracked on the first word. But she said the first word anyway, and then the second, and then the third, and then she was reading, slowly, clearly, without hurry, from the first page of the true will. She said, I, Aldric Fenn, of the manor and the county herein named, being of sound mind and firm intention, and desiring that my estate at my death shall pass in accordance with my true and unforced wishes, rather than in accordance with any other document that may be produced by any other hand, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament, revoking all prior wills and any subsequent forgery. The room did not move. She read on. She read the bequest to the church. She read the bequest to Sarah Duskwood. She read the bequest to Marta, to Thomas, to the scullery girls, to the footmen, to each of the household by name with the exact sums attached. Marta had begun to weep. Thomas had sat down on the floor with his head in his hands. She read the bequest to Cedric, the townhouse, the annuity, the conditions. Cedric's face had gone the color of paper. She read the final provision. She read her own name. To Myrka Varek, who has served this house in silence and in faith for 19 years, and who has served me personally as scribe, executor, and confidante for 11 of those years, I bequeath the manor and all lands, tenancies, mills, fisheries, timber rights, and appurtenances thereto, entailed to her and her heirs in perpetuity, with the single condition that she use them as she sees fit and answer to no man in the matter. She lifted her eyes from the page. She looked at Cedric. She said, in a voice that had steadied by then and was clear and low and unafraid, signed in his own hand on the second Tuesday of April, in the presence of the 3 witnesses now standing behind me. Sarah Duskwood holds the sealed copy. The original is in my hand. She set the pages down on the table in front of Master Coburn. She said, Master Coburn, please read them yourself. And then, sir, please do your duty. Master Coburn read the will. He read it slowly and carefully, comparing it against the sealed copy Sarah Duskwood had placed on the table, comparing the signatures against a signed letter from Lord Fenn that he happened to have in his own case. The 3 witnesses swore, one by one, that they had watched Lord Fenn sign the document in April of the year before last, sober and clear-minded in the library of the manor, and that they had signed it themselves as witnesses on the same afternoon, and that no coercion of any kind had been used. Sarah Duskwood swore that she had received her copy by the hand of a writer paid by Lord Fenn, sealed and unopened in the May of that year, and that she had kept it in a locked box in her cottage from that day until the previous morning, when she had opened the box only to bring the copy to this room. Master Coburn nodded. He turned to Cedric. Sir, Master Coburn said, this is the true will. The document you produced through Master Velich is a forgery. I am obliged, under the laws of this county and the kingdom, to report this to the magistrate. I would advise you and your council to make no attempt to leave the manor before the magistrate arrives. Master Velich had already begun edging toward the door. 2 of the footmen, the same 2 footmen who had once carried Halbrecht Voss's baggage out of the manor 20 years before, stepped into the doorway and stood there without expression. Master Velich stopped. Cedric said, This is madness. This is. You cannot possibly. My father would never have left the estate to a servant, to a half-orc. Myrka looked at him. She said, quietly, He did not leave it to a servant. He left it to me. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. She had been silent for 20 years, and she had used, in the past hour, more words than she had used in the whole of that time, and she had discovered, with a small, quiet astonishment that she did not let show, that the voice was still there, and that it was hers, and that she could use it or not use it as she chose. It was not a gift she had lost. It was a gift she had been keeping. The magistrate arrived that evening. He was not a man in Cedric's pay. Master Coburn had been careful to send the message himself, through his own clerk, to a magistrate from the neighboring county whom he had known for 40 years, and whose honesty he trusted the way one trusts the weight of stone. The forgery was examined. Master Velich, under questioning, and after being informed that the penalty for forgery of a nobleman's will was hanging, produced within an hour a full confession implicating Cedric as the instigator and himself as the willing tool. Cedric was arrested. Lady Vessa fainted. The infant Aldric was taken into the care of his wet nurse, a village woman whose own child had died the previous winter, and who would keep him for the next several months while the family's affairs were sorted out. Cedric was not hanged. He was fortunate in this. The penalty for the forgery itself would have been hanging, but the true will had provided for him an annuity, a townhouse. And Myrka, when the magistrate asked her whether she wished to press for the maximum penalty against her former master's son, thought for a long time and then said in her low, steady voice, No, Lord Fenn provided for him. I will honor that provision. The forgery is a separate matter for the law. Let the law take its lesser course. The law's lesser course, in the event, was 7 years imprisonment in the County Gaol, forfeiture of the townhouse, and reduction of the annuity by half. Cedric served the 7 years. He came out a diminished man. He went abroad. He was not seen again in the county. Lady Vessa returned to her family with the child. She wrote to Myrka once, 5 years later, a stiff, formal letter asking whether the boy might come to the manor for a summer visit, since he was, after all, a Fenn, and the manor was, after all, his ancestral home. Myrka wrote back, in her clean, small hand, that the boy would be welcome for such visits as he wished to make, provided he made them of his own free will and not at his mother's instigation, and provided he understood that the manor was not, and would not be, his inheritance. Lady Vessa did not reply. But the boy, young Aldric, who was 9 by then, came the following summer, and the summer after that, and every summer of his boyhood, and Myrka taught him to ride, and to read the old books in the library, and to speak civilly to servants. And by the time he was a man, he was, of all the Fenns Myrka had known, the one who most reminded her of the old lord in his best moments. The household stayed. Marta remained head cook until she died at 72 and was buried in the parish churchyard with a stone that Myrka paid for herself. Thomas, who had inherited 5 years' wages and a small pension under the will, used the money to buy a small horse farm 3 villages away, but he returned to the manor every winter to help with the stables, and he was in the room 41 years later when Myrka died. The 2 scullery girls married 2 of the footmen and stayed on. The manor grew under Myrka's management, from an estate of moderate prosperity into one of the wealthiest in the northern counties, because she had learned, over 11 years of studying the accounts with Lord Fenn, exactly what mattered and exactly what did not, and she made her decisions with the same patience she had once used to teach herself the letters of the alphabet. Sarah Duskwood came to live at the manor 2 years after the reading of the will. She was 70 by then and could no longer manage the winters in Duskroot alone. She took a room in the East Tower with a view of the sunrise. She lived there for 11 years, teaching the tenant children to read and helping Myrka with the correspondence. And she died in her sleep on a spring morning with the window open and a book on her chest. Myrka buried her in the parish churchyard beside Lord Fenn and put a stone over her that read only her name and the words teacher and friend. Myrka herself lived to be 78. She never married. She never had children. She adopted, in her middle years, 3 half-orc girls from the northern villages who had been sold as she had once been sold, and she raised them at the manor, and she taught them to read, and she settled dowries on each of them when they married. The eldest of them, a woman named Rennell, inherited the manor after her, and Rennell's daughter after her, and the line runs there still. The bone pendant that Lady Fenn had given her, Myrka wore against her collarbone every day of her life until the day of her death, when she asked, in a whisper, that it be buried with her. It was. She spoke, in the 58 years between the reading of the will and her death, as much or as little as she chose. She did not become a talkative woman. She was known in the county as a lord of few words and long silences, which was the same as being a good lord in that country. But she spoke when speaking mattered, and she was silent when silence was better, and she never again, so far as anyone could remember, allowed anyone in her hearing to use the word beast of any orc, half or otherwise, in her presence, in her house, or in her county. She had learned, in one long lesson that had taken her 20 years to complete, that a voice is a thing that must be kept for what it is worth. And on the day it is spent, it must be spent completely, and for the truth, and for the person to whom it was owed all along. Lord Aldric Fenn had known. Lord Aldric Fenn had waited. And Lord Aldric Fenn, on the day of his death, had been read aloud by the voice he had helped to save, and by the woman he had helped to become, and by the servant who had said nothing for 20 years and, on the one morning it mattered, had said everything.